Welcome back. We're going to talk Subarus. Soon as this was postponed from yesterday because obviously Valentine's Day, and it probably wouldn't go down well in most households for you to be watching a live stream about your car rather than paying your other half attention, if you have another half. So tonight we're going to do questions and answers. Just fire your questions in, whatever you want. I will try my best to answer it with as much information as I can put across. If you're new here, put a Q before your question just so that I can highlight it and make sure that I don't miss it. I try and answer all the questions that come across, so if you put a Q at the beginning, it makes it a bit easier for me to sort of see which ones are questions, which ones are just comments or people talking amongst themselves. It does get a bit hectic in here at times. If you've got a question, I'd recommend putting it in early. That way it's pretty much guaranteed to get answered. There's always a mad rush at the end. I try and keep this within an hour if I can. Try and keep this within an hour if I can, and if you're watching on replay, thank you very much for joining us. Put your question in the comments and I will reply. So without further ado, I've got a couple of questions in, I think. Let's see, we've got some of the regulars in here: Zed, Lauren, Lynn, Callan, Christopher Clark, yo, David, hi. Oh, Neil, you got the email. Right, okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just going to start off with a quick question from Lynn. I think it's Mark, actually, but from memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. Hi, Duncan. My Hawkeye has a Cyvex S6 Plus ECU on it. How do I check for an ABS fault, as the 16-pin is obviously redundant? Okay, the easiest way to do that is to get the standard ECU just plugged back in, just so you can power it up so that the OBD port works again, basically. Cyvex hasn't got pass-through on the OBD plug, so it's not going to work for reading the ABS sensor faults, I'm afraid. So yeah, standard ECU back in there just so it'll power up. Check the ABS fault, and then yeah, then you're good to go. Put the Cyvex back in. Okay, and just show that up again. The car seems to be locking up in and out of tight parking spaces with the diff set to auto. That might be something else, but try and find an ABS fault as well, or first, before going on to sort of another issue on that. Right. Okay, Mr. Turbo Bastard. Evening, Duncan. What's the fastest spooling turbo for 450 to 500 brake horsepower? I presume on a EJ207 or a 257, like 450, ball bearing, Garrett core, MD321T or T plus or a V. The 3071 is fast spooling for that. I think it's probably about 3,500 before you get about a bar of boost on that. On a STI anyway. On a WX without the VVT heads, it's going to be a bit later than that, probably another 500 RPM later. But yeah, I'd probably go along the lines of something like a 3071 or yeah, or an MD321T if you're in the UK. Okay, right, we're getting loads of questions now. Cool, right. Sega MDE, right, I've heard that the CAE shifters can damage synchros. Any truth to this? I presume you mean the short shifters. Yes. The Subaru gearbox is a bit weird. It doesn't really like being rushed, and the short shifters make it really easy to rush it, and by doing that you're rushing the synchros, smashing the rings, and quite often damage the gearbox as well. It's cars with broken gearbox have often got one of these in. That's all I say. I think I did that in the 10 mods to avoid video about the short shifter. That was a Cobb short shifter, really nicely engineered. If you had a dog box, be brilliant, but on a standard box, I think the synchros just need the time to engage. Cool. Going to look at your buddy's 08 WRX and plug it into your laptop. Cool. Or plug your laptop into it. Yeah, perfect. You know enough to be looking at looking at the data and seeing what's going on in there. No problem at all. Right. Okay, Joseph LeMay. Good data logging programs. ROM Raider logger refuses to read my ECU. Okay, Joseph, what ECU is it? What year, model of the car? What ROM ID or ECU ID? Personally, I use ECU Edit. The logger software in there, I think, is brilliant. The graphing and the ability to make custom login screens rather than just looking at data fields, I think is worth its weight in gold. I like the way that it visually displays the maps as well, because you can often miss some out of place values if you're just looking at a data table, but on a 3D graph it's a lot easier to see visually whether there's any errors in there. But yeah, let me know the ROM ID. It's 2009 WRX. Yeah, ECU Edit. Have a look at that. There are various versions from a free version that will let you do it for a little while, but it's worth paying some money and getting a piece of software which will help you with everything. You know, ECU resets, you can download the maps, you can change the maps, upload new maps. It's kind of like a one-stop shop, and I prefer it to ROM Raider, although I have just loaded ROM Raider back onto my PC after years of not using it. I used it in the early days, but it has changed quite a bit and it is a lot better now. But if you're having problems getting ROM Raider logger to connect to your ECU, then have a look at ECU Edit. Right. Hold on a minute. No, I'll come on to that. Hold on. Right. Mark, following on from previous that don't have the standard ECU, what was the other possible issues? It could be the center diff binding up, or the solenoid that powers the center diff not releasing, or you've got an earth issue in there. Are you also getting the diff control lights flashing on the dash? That would probably be the only other issue that I would think of, but see if you can borrow a standard ECU. It doesn't need to start the car. You won't need the keys paired to the ECU just to power it up. Or if you're in trouble with that or can't find one, I'm pretty sure I've got a spare 4-plug ECU that will power it up. Right. Hi, Miguel. Right. Okay. Here we go. Are the STI top mount coolers worth changing to from the standard WRX units? Yes, definitely. It depends on the power level. I'm going to be doing some testing on top mounts soon, and also front mounts. The Hawkeye WRX top mount is actually pretty good. The STI one is slightly better because it's taller or deeper, taller. The Blob Eye and the Bug Eye WRX intercoolers compared to the STI ones, the STI win hands down. Not a lot in it power wise when you're just talking about 300 horsepower, but if you're pushing up sort of 330, 340 horsepower, the standard WRX intercooler won't be able to cope with that, so the STI one works better at actually getting rid of that heat. So it's worth changing. It depends on the power level that you're at. Right, Kellen, right, did you cover on a previous video how to set up ECU edit so it looks like yours? No, I didn't cover that, but in the members area I've uploaded the definitions for my logger screen, so if you copy those into your ECU edit directory, you can sort of select those display preferences, and it will look exactly like mine then. Ooh, that's a interesting one. Right, Rune, would you recommend a suspension upgrade or a turbo upgrade for a stage 2 WRX? My personal view with modifying a car is start with brakes, then suspension, then power. So that would be my thing. If you haven't already done the brakes, do the brakes. If you've done the brakes and not done the suspension, do the suspension. It will make it a quicker car and more reliable. Once you got the braking and the handling, then more power. Ooh, right, Simply Dave. Right, bought a 2006 Impreza R Sport. There's a problem with the key, so I need to input the immobiliser code twice to start it every time. What a pain in the ass. Is there a way to bypass the immobiliser? Subaru want £426 for a key. Yes, there is. I don't know off the top of my head, but if you send me an email, I'll dig around and see whether I can find it again. I found it a while back. Buzz me an email and I'll let you know. Right. Right, okay, Paul Bridson. Okay, down in, obviously it's going to be quite warm down in Australia, I guess, at the moment. Is it normal to see some bubbling in the overflow bottle on a 97 version 3 STI after doing some hard pulls? Have RCM extreme head bolts and head gaskets? Was previously lifting heads in standard head. Yeah, a little bit. The idea is that any expansion in there, it goes into the overflow bottle when it's hot, and when it cools down, it sucks it back into the system. So it's normal to see some. If it's overflowing out the top, then it's either a blocked rad or a bubble in the like an airlock in the radiator or somewhere in the system. I did the cam belt on my car this week, which was quite interesting because I always thought mine produced slightly less power than it should do, and turns out the cam timing was a tooth out, but when I put it all back together, it had that bubbling into the overflow tank, but it was an airlock in the system, and forcing it through solved it. But after doing some hard runs, I'd say that was normal, Paul. Hi, Damien. Right. Okay, yeah. If you're doing that with 2-bar boost, what's the temperature over there at the moment, Paul? Evening, Mel. How you doing? Right, evening. Right, okay, here we go. David Wills. Evening, Duncan. I am looking to move away from the K&M panel and my blob STI, as I believe it's causing an issue with dirty in the MAF. It's running 326 horsepower. What filter would you recommend? A dry cotton one if you can. Cosworth used to do one, but I think they stopped doing that years ago, and that flowed really well and was dry and didn't contaminate the MAF sensor. I'll do some research on that, because I'm just about to do another video on using the Forester test mule, comparing what the standard airbox will do versus induction kits and panel filters. So that will be quite a long test video, but just seeing whether a panel filter will improve the horsepower versus a standard air filter, and then with an induction kit see whether that actually makes any more power. Wait for that video if you can, David. If not, buzz me an email and I'll do some research. David Keown, are you still looking to review, compare virtual dyno software? Yes, I am. I was planning to do that a couple of weeks ago, and the day that I set aside for doing that, for filming that was free, it started to snow, and I didn't think that was a sensible thing to do. So as soon as I got a free day that I can do some like proper filming in the car and analyze it, then I'll be doing that test. Hopefully that'll be interesting to people, because not everyone has got access to a dyno. Right, the plan. Right, hi Duncan, are there any drawbacks from daily driving a fully forged 2.1 stroker apart from the regular oil changes and fuel? How fast would it wear out? How long will it last? 2005 STI. This is kind of like why I got rid of my grey Forester, the Nardo grey Forester STI that was running 450 horsepower. Had a lovely 2.35 engine in that was my spare engine for the race car, but because the race car engine didn't blow up, I still had a spare engine sitting there on a stand. Put that in the Forester when the 2.5 died, and doing daily miles on it, it just felt like the engine was built to do something exciting, and putting boring miles on it seemed like a waste. It should last 20,000-30,000 easily. If it's well built, it probably more than that. It's just, the oil changes and looking after it, and it's just the fact that it was built for so much more. That's probably the only thing I would say. But yeah, no drawbacks really. Right, 40 degrees in Australia at the moment. Christ. Yeah. I wish it was 40 here. Well, maybe not 40. I think I was in the dyno year and a half ago, and it was 57 degrees in there, and the customer was complaining that their car wasn't making much power. Funny that. Okay. Right, Subaru still do the Cosworth still do the Subaru panel filters. Yeah, it was always like my choice back in the day. It flowed well, was dry, never killed the mouth. Right, Chris Carew, Impreza WRX 98 version 4 JDM, nice. Trouble flattening and sealing the exhaust manifold flanges after porting. Are these the standard headers, I'm presuming? You need to get them to a milling shop really, so that they can mill it flat. Either that or an engineer's block. I can't remember the official name for it, but an engineered piece of flat metal, some wet and dry paper, paraffin or oil on there, and then just grind it flat. That should do it. I've done that with block halves and cylinder heads before, and it gets them absolutely flat. Yeah, failing that, just weld them together. Right. Right, is the stock Spec C 3-bar map sensor scale different to an Omni one? I was thinking of sticking that on as it reads the same, if it reads the same as the stock 2-bar one. No, completely different scale. The stock Spec C map sensor isn't a 3-bar map sensor, it's a 2.7 bar. The same as all the new age STI or WRX map sensors. They're all 2.7 bar, give or take a fraction. So I don't know where this like 3-bar map sensor rubbish came from, but yeah, the Omni one has got completely different scalings. The 0 point's completely different. So yeah, it's easy enough to scale it in the map. So no problem, easy. Sam Porter, right, RCM 600, have you mapped any? Yes, I have. Considering one on my EJ207, any idea what RPM it would hit full boost? Hitting 25 psi at 5,300 on the Mamba, so it's destined for the bin. Yes, laggy as hell. 335 wheel horsepower. Yeah, I don't know where they dreamt up this 600 badge from. It's not a 600 brake turbo, unless you're running 3-bar through it, but even then it's way beyond what it is. But what are you trying to get to power wise, Sam? Work back from there. Let me know what you're trying to get to power wise, and I'll tell you what turbo I would put on if it was my car. There we go, exactly what I would say. Right, just use the Subaru panel or the cotton replacement until you get till you jump to induction kit. I will do a test of the standard Subaru versus a cotton versus a K&N versus an induction kit, probably a K&N 57i, maybe another or a Perrin or something like that, but it depends what I can get hold of. Like free ideally, but depends what I can get hold of. Right, you need to watch my original Myths Busted video. No, it doesn't need a map. There is no way you can map a change of dump valve unless one of them was leaking, in which case, you know, it's a different issue altogether. Yeah, Thanks, Stephen. I'm trying to do as many videos as physically possible. Obviously, on the Forester, I'm not going to put a front mount, so I'm not going to test a front mount on there. So if there's anyone in the UK that wants to volunteer their car for a back-to-back test of a top mount versus a front mount, then feel free to drop me a mail and we'll see if we can put it together. But yeah, the panel filters, yeah, no problem. I can test that. That's easy. Right. Okay, Chris Carey, Pets version 4 JDM, me again. Right, map by me, May 23 with ESL until I can launch. The car is no longer holding the revs at 4K in first. How did I activate the launch control? Was that on the neutral switch on the gearbox on that, Chris? It's possible that the neutral switch is not working correctly, or it might be that what would I normally do on that? Yeah, it would normally be on the neutral switch on that, so it could be that. Right. Stephen Gibson, what's the most power a Ford built EJ25 will run, Duncan? IAG claim 1100 horsepower on their Stage X blocks. That's closed decked and pinned and supported and got all the other bits. I don't believe that personally. I think the heads will be lifting off way before it gets to that point. The most I got on my EJ257 before the head started lifting off, and that was with top hat, dart and sleeve liners in there, was 670, I think it was. But even with the dart and sleeves, even with firing inserts in the head gaskets, even with the heads drilled and a firing actually inserted into the heads, still getting head gasket issues just because the block just wiggles and moves. Billet block, different kettle of fish, but I still think you want to be going like head, sort of removing the head gasket to get up to that sort of level. I know Josh does it, Beta built, but I don't know how he's doing that, because yeah, I think that if it was an EJ257 for me, if it's a standard block, the standard block starts splitting at about 450. So unless you're doing stuff to support the liners, which are only 5mm thick, they're going to split at 450 regardless of whether you put the closed deck insert in the top, because that just supports that top edge, makes it look pretty, but I don't think it solves any of the issues. Not a popular opinion, that, with some people that sell those. Safe power. I always map it safe anyway. What do you want it to run, Stephen? That's probably the best answer. Right, Alan, what kind of power would 1050 ID injectors max out on a 235 450 fuel pump, high pressure reg, MDX 321V running 2-bar boost? Those injectors will cope with everything that turbo's got. Turbo's probably got, if that's on normal pump fuel, then it's probably got 500. 1050 injectors will cope with about 700. if it's maxing the injectors out at less than that, then I would say there's something else going on there. Right, hello from Mongolia. Blimey, that's another country on the list of people. Thank you very much for tuning in. Driven all the STIs from GC8 to VB. Last one was a JDM SG9 IAG long block. Okay, so best result quarter was 11.2, so what's that, about 450 horsepower, probably on the SG9 with the aerodynamics of a brick. Yeah, decent. Alright, it's my pleasure. Thank you for watching. Alright, okay, so yeah, when his up pipe's fitted, test the front mount and top mount back to back. Cool. Right, so Sam, you're looking for 500 horsepower. Right, needs mid to low 11 quarter mile ultimately. I would go a 3076, or unless you want to go rotated and put on a proper GT30 on that. Yeah, if you're doing quarter mile, you don't necessarily need the fastest spool. You know, you want top end power with that, but yeah, I'd probably go 3076 would be what I would be looking at on that, and a bit of nitrous if you definitely want to make that time. Callum, what we seeing for cylinder pressure on that full built? What pressures do you normally see? How do you mean cylinder pressure? Like doing a pressure compression check, or are you talking something else? Right, Simply Dave, in one of your videos you say to always keep a little fund in case things go wrong with your Subaru. What would you say is the minimum rainy day fund you should dedicate to Subaru issues? It depends what you're modifying. If you're modifying, let's say, like a Hawkeye STI, and you want to push it to 400 horsepower on a standard engine, then your rainy day fund should be essentially enough to build an engine, because it will go. If you just minimums on this, £500-600 is enough to cover most sort of things like wheel bearings or brake pads or brake lines, or sensors dying, MAF sensors and O2 sensors, and you know, it's a shame to have a car off the road just because you haven't got a little bit of fund behind you. But the question is not needing it, but you know, cars know if you haven't got any money left, and they'll guaranteed to go wrong. Okay, right, Chris, with the launch switch coming from the ECU, it will be grounded in a pin, so there'll be one wire connected to the wire going into the ECU, one side of the switch. The other side of the switch will be to ground, like chassis ground. So yeah, check that there's continuity on the switch, and that the other side of the wire is on the chassis. And that the switch is actually working. There's no current that goes through it, so it doesn't need to be a particularly bulky switch. Right, how critical is injection timing? I presume you're talking about an aftermarket ECU on this, Shadi. Can you give me a bit more information? Right, Neil, a few weeks ago in the live chat, a guy was having cold start issues with a Classic, with it almost stalling when being revved. Did you get to the bottom of this mapping issue or something else? I think it was a map sensor, off the top of my head, but I've slept since then, Neil, so I can't really remember. Oh, yeah, interesting question. Inverse Blue, what's harder on an engine, a larger turbo at lower boost or a small turbo at high boost? Will the airflow and power level still be the same with both? It depends how big the larger turbo is compared to how big the small turbo is. If they're both producing the same power, then the smaller turbo will be generating more heat. So you could argue that is more dangerous or more unsafe for the engine. Certainly more unsafe for the smaller turbo if it's certainly out of its efficiency area. But it's a really difficult subject. Like making power through the boost or through ignition timing or through leaning it out. You know, essentially you're creating the same cylinder pressure because it's the pressure that makes the power. It's just which one is more sustainable and less liable to have fluctuations that could cause like non-perfect running conditions. I think running at lower boost is probably a better option and making the power through other methods like ignition timing and fueling. Right. Okay. Okay, so right, Haltech Elite 1500. I've not found it that critical. Like on the Cyvex, you could do the injection timing at 360 or 540. It doesn't really seem to make much of a difference. Admittedly, I haven't spent a huge amount of time changing it and seeing what the impact is, but it will run in either way. If you've got other issues, then probably be looking elsewhere for the solutions for those. All right, yeah, Cooper K. Right, come across this quite a few times. Turned off the code for the EGT sensor and removed it, but ROM Raider still throws out a code for the EGT sensor. It doesn't bring on the check engine light on the dash. Does this make your car run in limp mode? No, it doesn't. If you switched it off on the dash, then for some of them, like the TGV does the same thing as well. It will still record the check engine light code behind the scenes, but it just won't bring on the engine light, and it won't put it into limp mode. You've switched it off if it's not showing the check engine light. It's just that it will. If you read the ECU, it would actually be in there, but it's not doing anything. Alright, Bleezy Turbsky. Can you run 700 horsepower on a 450 litre fuel pump? 1000cc injectors? Do I need a 4-bar map sensor? Would I need double pumps? I'm not going fancy swell pump, no dry sump, just baffle, just meth mixing tank. Can you run 450, 700? Well, the injectors will do 700 just. The 450 fuel pump, I think that's on the edge of what that can do. 4-bar map sensor, yeah, to run 700 horsepower you're going to be over 2 bar of boost, so you're going to need a 4-bar map sensor. If you don't do double fuel pump, then I think you're on the edge of an awful lot of things, and trying to cut corners you'll end up either breaking something substantial or not getting to where you want to get to. So I'd probably overspec a bit more on some of the bits in there. Maybe the injectors, certainly the map sensor. Dry sump you don't need if you're not going to be driving it on track at any significant speed. Swell pot, again, you don't need unless you're driving it on track at a certain speed. But I just get the impression you're trying to overstretch on all of the bits, and in my experience from doing that, you end up sort of falling short of your target. Right, Mike K. Good evening, Duncan. We've always been curious how to map for nitrous in the fuel map. Can you talk us through? Watching all the way from Zimbabwe. We've got a wide-ranging audience tonight. Nitrous in the fuel map on the standard ECU, or were you talking about on an aftermarket ECU on that, Mike? On a Cyvex, doing it's pretty easy. You just set up a scaling for the extra fuel that you want the injectors to add in when the nitrous is active, and you're setting a duty for the solenoid to actually trigger the nitrous system, and that duty also then triggers the proportion of the extra fuel map that you put in. You would also have ignition reduction, so you generally take out ignition advance for nitrous. So let's say 50% duty, you'd be taking out 3 degrees of ignition on a typical Subaru engine with a decent sized shot of nitrous. It's a complicated thing. Standard ECU, if you're trying to run nitrous on the standard ECU, then you would have a separate solenoid for the fueling, separate solenoid for the gas, using a TPS throttle position sensor to activate it like Fast and Furious, and hoping for the best on the ignition timing. Nick, what about the Arashi turbos? Grants does well. Was it easy to scale the math? I don't know whether that's a question for me, but right. Cooper K, how are we doing for time wise? Quarter of an hour left. Right, Blob Eye STR, Blob Eye ECU and a Bug Eye chassis. Everything works good, but I have some weird codes for alternator. Do you know the issue? Yes, it's got the wrong alternator on it, but if you switch off the code, which I think is 0545, then it gets rid of that issue. It's the smart charge thing. Let me just check what the code is. On the snap-on readers or whatever, it comes up with a brake booster for this one, which is really weird. No, 558 0558 I think is the alternator one. But yeah, you can switch that code off and it'll be fine. Right, version 5 classic overheating, no heat from blower. Would I expect in head gasket or something simple like a thermostat or water pump? What would I be looking at? Radiator to start with. See whether the radiator's blocked. It's it's 24 years old. Be looking at the rad. Check that blows through nicely with the hose pipe. Thermostat, yeah, they can see shut. You could also have like the heater matrix could be blocked. Had quite a few of those on cars recently within the last year where the heater matrix is just blocking or they're corroding inside. I wouldn't be jumping to head gasket issues as a first stop. Probably the easiest thing to do is change the thermostat and see whether that fixes it. Liam, right. Hi Duncan, my friend had his Forester tune by you a few years ago. It was done in Norfolk. Do you still come to other places to tune cars, or will you just do it at your own place? I haven't got my own place. I haven't got my own dyno. I go to lots of other people's dynos. I haven't been up to Norwich for a while, mainly because it's like a 7-hour each way journey for me, and the last time I went up there to do a day of mapping, 2 of the 3 guys didn't have the courtesy to let me know that they weren't going to show up, so I was not best pleased. Not a problem doing it nowadays because I take deposits from people and magically they all turn up now. Right. Okay, stock location, twin scroll. Don't really want to go rotated. Yeah, it's fair enough. 3076. Have a chat with Rob at Fastline, Sam, and see what he can spec out turbo wise for you on that. Whether he can do a twin scroll version of that, which might work really nicely if he's got the housings for it. Right, what about running nitrous with 100% methanol fuel? Surely a perfect match. No, methanol, 100% methanol, I really don't like it. It just destroys all the oil content. It dries out the cylinder walls, you get a lot of scuffing, wears out the pistons, rings, huge amount. Goes into the oil, and yeah, it's not the perfect match. It's a perfect recipe for a dead engine. It needs lubrication. 50% meth, yeah, with nitrous, love it. I ran nitrous on E85, perfect, lovely. Could put whatever ignition timing I want. I have 300 shot of nitrous, and it was proper yeehaw. It was good. 100% meth, I don't think is good for engines, not unless you're rebuilding them every week. Already switched off the code? Yeah, perfect. You'll be fine. Right, getting David Keown saying getting P1518 starter switch circuit low input on SG9. We built the starter and cleaned all the contact and it won't clear. Any issues? I presume the car's still starting. I have no idea on that. I've never come across that issue. If someone else has come across it, please answer David's question. But David, I wouldn't have any issues with switching it off in the map and seeing how it goes. If the car starts, it starts. Right, where are we doing? 9 minutes left. Okay, any advantage for a divorced bell mouth downpipe? No, not in my opinion. I think the bell mouth downpipe works slightly better. The only disadvantage you get with that is the fact that if you've got a weak actuator, it can sometimes suck the penny open. But if you've got a proper sized actuator spring in there or running or have adjusted it properly, then there shouldn't be any advantage. Don't believe Sean Bradford's questions. These are the reasons you need a bigger turbo. I love customers that try and compete with each other because it keeps me busy. Oh, Alexandra and Maria, thank you for all your Subaru knowledge. No problem. I installed an IAG air oil separator. After install, I heard a loud knocking sound. Goes away after 1 to 2 minutes. I presume you're talking it's internal to the engine rather than just the air oil separator knocking on the chassis or on the bulkhead, depending on where you've installed it. I had a similar noise like that on my Hawkeye STI, where it was actually an idler that the little roller bearing in the idler was just knocking side to side a little bit. Sounded like a bottom end. Wasn't the bottom end. Changed the idler. It was good as gold. Yeah, ethanol would be better than methanol. I think so. Doug keeps asking me to do a E50 map comparison to methanol 50%, which I will get around to doing at some point. It's just ethanol, neat ethanol in the UK is quite tricky to get hold of. Used to be able to get E85 at the pumps, but not anymore. We're not allowed good stuff like nice new Subaru models. We don't get those. We get all the boring ones. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Right, Nick, is 11 degrees of timing a good figure to run on 99 octane? It depends what load. 11 degrees of timing at idle is fine. Depends on the revs. 11 degrees peak torque is probably a little bit low on a EJ257, very low on a 207. Yeah, I'd say depends on the compression ratio. Yeah, there's lots of different things. Right. Yes, internal from the engine. Sounds scary like rod knock. If you hold it at 2,500, you should be able to hear rod knock, regardless of whether it's warm or cold. Mine sounded really bad, like knock, like bottom end knock, but it was just the small idler to the right of the cam belt tensioner. Just a little sideways movement in that was causing the same sort of things. Get a screwdriver onto the engine and listen to where the noise is coming from. If it's central along the join of the block, then yeah, it might be rods, but yeah, if it's towards the front of the engine, then I would bet on an idler. Kieran, right. Hi Duncan, recently purchased an 05 JDM Hawk STI. Came with a Grady Profec boost controller. I hate those things, they're rubbish. And has supposedly been mapped for our fuel by JM Imports. Found it over boosting on partial throttle. Yeah, I'm not surprised. Bin that and put it back to the standard ECU controlling the boost. It's much better. Standard ECU controls the boost way better than that Grady rubbish, I'm afraid. Take the Grady off, sell it on eBay. Perfect. Sorry, yeah. So peak boost, let's say at 4,200 RPM, peak load, peak boost. Like all the air molecules and the fuel molecules are all close together and squashed together. The flame doesn't take long to travel across the whole of the cylinder, so it needs the least amount of ignition time. And at that point, I go into it on the ignition timing module in the Academy, Nick. So it'll be in there. Yeah, I'd just bin it. I hate them. I think they're rubbish. The whole way that the Subaru ECU knock control system works is if it hears bad things going on, it will take out ignition timing. If it still hears bad things going on, it will eventually drop the boost down. And if you've got a separate boost controller still winding the boost in there, it's not going to end very well. So I would bin it. Or sell it on eBay. Standard ECU will control the boost much better if it's set up properly. Right, we are approaching the end, so any more questions before I bring this to an end? Have I answered everyone's questions? Let me see if I can go back up here. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment. Yeah, I think I have. Anyway, if I haven't, then yeah, I will see you in the next stream. I hope everyone enjoyed the fuel testing. I tried to be as fair as possible with that. It is difficult to completely drain the system, but I think the long and short of it was that they were all pretty much the same. But there'll be more tests coming. So anyway, yeah, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next week.